ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Distinguished Alumni Lecture Series for the College of Engineering. So for this afternoon, we'll have two speakers. First, we will have Engineer Victorio Emmanuel Ochave, ESEE from UP Diliman in 1988. Also took his Masters of Electrical Engineering, also here in UP Diliman, and finished back in 96. He has a long list of professional experience, but I'd just like to highlight some of which, including being former asset director, division chief of ASTI. Okay, for a time, sige. He also worked for Remic Manufacturing Philippines and is now the Senior Vice President and Chief Operations Officer of Cirtec Advanced. Was alleged in March. Okay. So without further ado, I present to you Engineer Jojo Chavez. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me here, Richard. I think you invited me last year. Hindi ako nakakasagot. But most of the students here are graduating or in their final semester or final year. And so you are having your own final year projects right now, or trying to find a project, still in the process of looking for a project or finding a project. Well, I'm honored to be invited to talk to you. I will, for the next 30 minutes or so, I will bore you with some details of my professional life. I hope you can gain some learnings from. But in my talk, I only have two or three points that I want to make. The first one is skills. I think the title of my talk is Fire and Skill, or Skill and Fire. Skill is for excellence and expertise, and fire is for passion. I believe students like you, young people like you, need to learn as much skills as you can while you're young, while you're active, while you're energetic, and at the same time have some passion and meaning for the skills and expertise that we have. So let me just introduce to you myself and my experience, my brief professional experience in the last 20 plus years, 25 years. I worked in ASTI initially after graduation as a research engineer. After being invited by Dr. Rolando Daico, and I rose from the ranks, became a chief of the division, and I was fortunate enough to be part of the pioneering group of engineers at the time who congregated in ASTI because of what ASTI offered at the time. They know what ASTI is. They know ASTI is Advanced Science and Technology Institute. It's a DOST agency back there in CP Garcia, right at the corner, almost at the corner of Katipunan Road and CP Garcia. We used to stay in NEC building beside Melchor Hall. It's supposed to be research agency, the advanced research agency of the UST at the time. And in the early 90s, ASTI was the only institution that was offering a very good laboratory environment, that was offering projects, a variety of projects to students who were interested in engaging in product development. Unfortunately, at the time, I think the EE department was not yet fully equipped. As I see right now, the EEE department has made leaps and bounds in the area of facilities, software development, software tools, and the faculty, the mentors that we have at the moment. But back then, we didn't have that. We didn't have what you have right now. In fact, we had nothing. Roel was my contemporary, so he knew. We had nothing at that time. However, I was fortunate enough also to be taken as an informal apprentice by Dr. Azarcon, who was then engaged in sort of a product development activity for the AFP at the time. And he was housed, his laboratory, it's not really a laboratory, but I would call it a sweatshop, was located in that barracks looking like tin shelter beside the tennis court beside Melchor Hall. And at that time there was no air conditioning, and I had to work there. For me it was like I was like a child shown a playground with a lot of eye candy inside. He had instruments for wireless communications. He was working on those old manpacks of the military and the old walkie-talkies of the soldiers. Sir Hilary. And he took me in as an apprentice with no pay. With no pay, but I was just too willing to work there because I was interested in the work. And I remember fully that the spectrum analyzer we had to use was almost like as big as a small personal ref. And we had to pull it across the room using casters, using wheels, because it was too heavy. It was vacuum tube based. And we used that for spectrum analysis. And we had to work together with these other technicians with our shirts off. We were sweating like crazy, and we were working on the bench with our sweats off, with our shirts off, because it was too hot and there was no air conditioning at that time. But I was just too happy to work there on the bench with him. And there was this one super technician of his. They call him super technician because he was very experienced in wireless, in RF circuits. And he noticed that I was popping my FET power transistors very too often, with a cap popping on my face very too often, because I was working on power amplifiers at the time. And he showed me all the tribal knowledge that he had in working on RF circuits. He may not have had the best explanation, theoretical explanation on how the circuit worked, but he knew what points to probe, what points to adjust, what capacitor to tweak. And I enjoyed all of that. So that was my undergrad year. I graduated, went to ASTI upon the invitation of Dr. Gaiko, and ASTI was the best environment possible at that time. I was telling you guys a while ago, and the government gave us all the software that we wanted, the test equipment that we listed every year, year in, year out. We had our budget and it was approved. Of course, you have to go through Congress to defend your budget. You have to deal with this congressman who wanted to insert some of their projects in your budget. So they were that brazen. And but ASTI served as a very good training ground, and it was hard, and it was good. It was a good experience because all the opportunities for skills development were given to us. Professor Solis could attest to that, and many of us took the masteral scholarship while we were still working with ASTI on projects. So our schedules were very hectic. In the language you have right now, it was very toxic. I remember clocking into ASTI for my 8 a.m. shift, 8 a.m. up to 5 p.m., working on projects and checking on, having a lot of these meetings and working on some things for the government. By 6 p.m., because we were given scholarships, I was off to attend MS classes from 6 to 9 p.m. So after exiting ASTI at 5, I had to go to MS class at 6, up to 9 p.m. By 10 p.m., I was back at the ASTI lab to work until wee hours of the morning, until 2 or 3 a.m. on the bench for my own project, for my own project inside the ASTI, which I couldn't do in the morning because there were a lot of meetings at the time. So you have to work with that, and there were a lot of people who were doing the same thing. These are contemporaries of mine whom I now see as VPs, CEOs, directors, senior managers in some other institution or companies at the moment. And looking back at that time, I think we were paying our dues back then. So we were staying there for the whole night. I would doze off for a couple of hours. By 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. I would go home to my house, to my wife in Cambias, have breakfast, take a shower, and by 8 a.m. I have to be back in the office. Toxic talaga. So, however, I never thought of myself as a masochist because of, and we never complained. I never heard anyone complain in our group because it was fun. We all enjoyed it. We all wanted it, and we were all hungry for that experience. I never heard a whimper from anyone in those years. And in my stay in ASTI, I was doing projects, wireless circuits, RF circuits. I was doing my MS. My project was oscillators and large signal, or power amplifiers for microwave applications. And I had this huge problem of using CAE tools, CAD tools, which I couldn't replicate on the bench. When I started fabricating the circuit boards, I couldn't fabricate. I couldn't replicate the results, and that intrigued me a lot, and that led me to further study on, the problem, what the problem was. And it led me to device modeling, it led me to CAE algorithms for microwave nonlinear circuits. It led me to nonlinear equations, solving nonlinear equations. And at that point, all of these terms, all of these fields or areas of study actually, it also led me to semiconductor models like FET models, large signal models, circuit models of FETs, of the devices. At that point, I realized that a lot of these fields I had actually gone through already, whether as a course in undergraduate studies or in my MS studies. I went through the courses of Dr. Araneta for semiconductor modeling, device modeling, or semiconductor theory, which is very boring. I would say, he's not here anymore, so I say it was boring. At that time, I thought it was very boring, so I was very disinterested. But I went through the course and passed the course. I went through Professor Solis's feedback and control theory. And again, I think classmate ko si Roel noon. And again, we passed the course and perfunctorily or without much interest, but we passed the course. I remember vividly attending Dr. Pacheco's engineering math for linear solutions to linear and nonlinear equations. And it was just a hell for me to go through that. But I passed. And when I was doing already, several years down the road, when I was doing my projects in ASTI and was working on my MS, I realized that, all these courses, all these fields, actually now make sense. They make sense. And I wish I had listened better to Professor Solis, to Dr. Araneta, and to Dr. Pacheco. Because they're very useful in solving my problem. Semiconductor theory, Araneta's semiconductor theory gave me the criteria to choose the right device model to use in my simulation. Because there's a lot of models if you read the papers. There's a lot of models. Control theory, feedback theory gave me the equations to solve my oscillation and amplifier circuit. While engineering math became very, very useful because I have to solve this linear and these sets of matrices and arrays produced by from the circuit equations. And all of these fields came together, they made sense, they fit, and I was able to formulate my MS thesis, finish my project in time, and open other doors for me in my career. Because in private, when I went to private industry, to the electronics industry, I could converse quite easily with REMEX US R&D engineers on the circuit problems that we had in the factory, because I had that background, because I learned how to solve that problem with depth and with enough understanding. But solving that problem required me to be armed with all of these different courses, different tools that I have gone through and wasn't really very interested when I was going through them. But at the end, all these skills, all this knowledge became very, very useful. And that's the gist of what I want to say right now is, especially you guys, you have the best environment right now. You have the best professors. You have the best laboratories. I've seen the labs of Joe and Richard. You have the best tools available, which we didn't have back then. And you have the time and energy to learn as much as you can. Because several decades or several years down the road, you will find use for this knowledge and skills. I assure you. I bet you will find use for this knowledge and skills. These hours of listening to your boring professor, or the hours of reading or solving problems from the book that seem to amount to nothing, you will find use for this. In industry, the first thing that slapped my face when I joined the industry was that everybody starts from zero. Nobody knew squat about anything, regardless if you're from UP or from Bicol State University, or whether you're a Salvatorian or a graduate who took 8 years to finish your course. It didn't matter. It really didn't matter. We have this program of cadetship, cadet engineers, and we would hire 25, 30 engineers from different universities almost every year. And at one point I had the luck of being able to interview one batch of UP students, UP graduates who were about to graduate, and was able to convince about 15 or 20 or so of them to join us in REMEC. So they joined us despite the factory being far from Manila. It's in Laguna, and together with graduates from PUP, San Carlos, St. Louis, they joined us and worked in the factory, and lo and behold, I found out that this was the first cadetship that we had program, and lo and behold, we found out that all of them were not really very productive in the factory. So we found a lot of difficulties that they encountered, both UP and non-UP graduates. Some had difficulty reading or understanding the schematic drawing. I'm pretty sure you guys wouldn't have a problem with that. Some would have difficulty in understanding device or circuit behavior. Some would have other kinds of difficulties, like being able to work productively and harmoniously with other people, whether it's a loading technician or assembler or is managing. Some would end up fighting with other people. Some would have difficulty communicating their solutions, their findings, whether verbal or written. And it bothered us a lot because sayang, they were cream of the crop that we selected from the different universities. And we had to let them go through a certain program programs that teach them how to make schematics, teach them even how to write technical reports. And for I think for 6 months, not 4 to 6 months, before they became even productive in the factory. So that was huge reality check for us, and in fairness to the UP graduates who were recruited at that time, actually they were the only ones who showed independence of thought and action and capability to communicate and plan. That was my observation. That was the only difference. But right from the start, in terms of skills and knowledge, they actually are the same. And I'm telling you this now because I want you to be moved into getting as much skills and knowledge as you can get, because you have the opportunities right now. It's being provided to you. Unlike us older engineers, we have to learn the hard way, and we have to go through long training periods, being understudies for U.S. engineers or the senior engineers, and being a UP graduate at that time, I hated that, reporting to a U.S. engineer. So but right now you have a lot of opportunities where you can get an edge, and you can get that skill and knowledge, where you will have an edge in the workplace later on. So my company in 2000, I joined the company. It was a startup company. It was the first microwave, a pioneering microwave company in PEZA in 1997. It was a risky move, but again, we enjoyed it. It quickly became a $40 million company and an 60 or $80 million company in 2000 or 2001. 2001, we were acquired by Remec, a US ODM company that was producing its own devices or products for the defense industry in the US, defense and commercial aerospace applications. In 2005, however, things went south, starting going south for Remec. It had to split the company, and one half was sold to PowerWave, which was again another new company. And eventually, the facility was shut down. We went through several crises in the workplace. We had 2 or 3 layoffs of in the workplace. We reached about 1,500, 1,500 people, but eventually had to put the company on the block because of difficulties at the time. 2001 was the internet stock bubble, when the internet stock bubble burst, and that affected the industry a lot. In 2005 or 2008, the facility was eventually shut down, and it left about 800 people with no job. We had everybody from the GM, the president, down to the worker was left without jobs. They consolidated the factory in Thailand, where they have a huge campus for their operations. And we had no choice, but we thought of three of us, the CFO, the GM, and I thought of setting up a company, a startup, to do EMS services, which we saw to be still in demand at that point. EMS is electronic manufacturing services. So, with our surveillance pay, we pulled them together and put them in this company that we set up as if expected. And we started buying equipment on eBay and on the auction website that the company was getting rid of. On the first day of having no job, if yesterday was our last day in the company, today was our first day in the new company. We immediately started and moved all our equipment to one warehouse site in Laguna. And we had no customer to speak of at that time, so it was quite daring and risky. But we went around with a business plan and talked to some local investors, and we found some investors in the country who were willing to support us. In about a year and a half, so for about 9 months of operation, everybody in the management had no salaries except, of course, the workers, the few workers that we hired. We didn't take any salary. And in about a year and a half, we were lucky enough to get a customer that was giving us a business of $1 million a month. And we were making good money for about a couple of years. After about 2 years, Remec saw us again and acquired the company because they saw the numbers, they saw the business that we were generating, and they liked it. They liked the numbers, and they acquired the company. And so we were full circle. We were back with our Remec brethren, and we've gone full circle. In 2010, we joined them again in their facility in Carmel Bay. I'm telling you all of this because it's the industry, the electronic industry is, as probably Sir Hilary would also tell you, it's characterized by a cycle of boom and bust. We had our crisis periods and we had our successes, but all of that we had to go through that with a lot of risks. Looking back, I think we took a lot of risks. And that should be part of an engineer's character, is to take risks. Have a lot of skill, acquire a lot of skill, and then take a lot of risks, calculated risks, of course. And I think that is also true for other engineering companies, other technology companies, whether local or outside the country. You would see the same pattern. you have skills, you have the skills and knowledge, and you have this fire in your gut to take risks. You have to have that passion. And if I look back at that point when we had to put in, we had no jobs and we had to put in money to start the company, I would say that we didn't feel afraid at that time. We felt risky, but we didn't feel afraid because we were so sure of what we were planning to do. We were so sure of what we wanted to do. And again, the hardships in setting up a new organization, running a new organization, getting new business, cultivating new relationships with customers, that didn't matter a lot. Because at the end, we were doing what we wanted to do. And that was exciting. That was exciting. So, yeah. Given all of this, I mean, let's go to the part where you should have meaning. You have skills, you have passion, you found your skill and you found your passion, but you have to have meaning. Getting all of these skills and having all of this energy to do certain things is not for yourself alone. It's not for your family's economic future alone. It's not for your ego alone. It's something else. It's something bigger than that. You have to find meaning in what you're doing. And for me, the meaning came in my strong belief that the engineering community, an engineer, is very important in nation building. So, as corny as it may sound, you are very important in nation. Engineers, scientists, we need more engineers, scientists, doctors, teachers, software developers, ICT professionals, more than lawyers and politicians. For the life of me, I really cannot understand what the fuss is all about when all the media talk about the results of the bar exams for 2 weeks and focus on all of those who pass and all of those who didn't. For God's sakes, we have too many lawyers already in the country. How come nobody makes a fuss about the board exams of engineers, the results of board exams? There have been too many movies or telenovelas on TV depicting lawyers. But have you seen a movie or a telenovela depicting engineers and scientists? None, right? None. And yet, these are the people that we need. You are the people that this country needs. And even when I was in undergraduate, in my undergraduate years, I've always believed engineering and science needs to be at the service of the people. When Dr. Daiko invited me to join ASTI, his sales pitch was, "Joe, mababa sweldo, pero para sa bayan to." Yun ang sinabi niya. And I needed no more convincing after he said that. So I did that, and the pay was 3,000 pesos a month at that time. And but we were enjoying and we were learning, and And when we were in ASTI, we knew, we saw, and we knew, we actually saw that what we were doing had benefit for the people. We were doing, Sir Hilary would remember, these radio modems from 9600. That was at a time when there was no internet, there was no ESL, there were no phones, for God's sake, in a lot of areas in Metro Manila. There were no landlines. And we were making these radio modems, some at 9600 baud, and eventually we went up to 512 kbps. We developed that in-house in ASTI, and we used them for this farmers cooperative who then had direct access to Manila traders. And in so doing, they were able to undercut the Chinese middlemen who were part of a cartel, the rice cartel at that time, and jacking up the prices while buying them at very low prices from the farmers cooperatives, while selling them at very expensive prices here in Manila. So that was a very disruptive technology at that time for them. And soon we were deploying these radio modems for government agencies, for schools, and it was very, very actual for us that we saw the benefits of what the engineers were doing, what we were doing. Of course, Joel is with us right now, but I think we found meaning there, and a lot of my colleagues at the time who are now movers or officers in various companies and institutions in the industry, I believe shared that same commitment, shared that same vision, that we should make use of what we know, what we have, the technology we have, and what we can get together. We can put things together. We should use this for development of the country, for the betterment of the lives of our people. In the factory, in private industry, when I was in industry, it was very concrete also for us. Because every time the engineers were successful in introducing a new product from a customer or from the US R&D center, every time we were successful in introducing it into the factory and pushing it into full production, we were able to hire a couple of hundred workers and some additional engineers off the streets. Very concrete. On one hand, if we were a failure, if we failed in solving a yield problem or a circuit design issue that caused some yield problem in production, we have to slow down the production or stop the production altogether. And that causes workers to be put on vacation leave, or worse, be laid off if we lose the customer. That's how concrete the relationship is between technology and engineers and the lives of our people. Very quite often, our workers would ask us or approach me and some of the engineers and ask, "Sir, kailan ba maaayos yung problema niyo? Kasi wala na kaming panggastos eh. Palagi na lang kami nakalive." So the pressure is there. And the effect of your competency, the effect of your success and the effect of your failure is readily felt by not just 1 or 2 or 300 people, but multiply that by 6 by their families. If I laid off 100 people because we stopped production, that's 600 people affected altogether immediately. So that's how important you engineers are for development, and how important you are, the role that you play in the lives of not just your families, but of people around you, the community and the nation in general. So, I'd like to end my boring talk, and I'd like to thank you for listening and not dozing off. Fire and skill. When you start doing your projects, and once you leave the university, start joining the rat race, remember fire and skill. Thank you.
The last, say, 10 years, how would you characterize your level of development work in the electronics industry? So, we're not sabihin 10 years, but when you started and how it is today. So, malaki din yung pinagbago. Mas kilala na ba ang Pilipinas for development? And what's ano ba yung kailangan to be able to update to the present state of the electronics industry?
Definitely, a lot has changed. No? You can now hear of companies, although there's still very few of them, companies now setting up some sort of R&D units or product development units in their organization. In Surtec, I was fortunate enough to have a boss, owner of the factory, the owner, who believed in development, product development, and was willing enough. I was able to convince them to spend initially about $100,000 for a budget to do diplexer development, and I was able to hire a couple of UP graduates to start the project and buy the software. 2 decades ago, I could not accept the company of Sir Hilary at the time and Alexi. One would not hear of any company spending money on product development because it's very risky. It's very risky. Unless you're sure of great returns, it's not really for everybody. But that's one. People are the capitalists, the local capitalists, and investors are now more exposed to risk taking because of the success stories abroad that they hear and read about. Not only that, the infrastructure is slowly improving. You now have the manpower base that you need to start something. Imagine, how many were we in the batch? Well, probably 40 people in one batch. But we graduated, but only 12 or 15 graduated every year. So how can you start this development community with 12, 15 people every year? But right now you have hundreds, I guess. You have 1,000 undergrad students, and how many graduate every year? Several hundreds, right? 100. But that's a big improvement. So you have 100 people, 100 candidates that can be tasked for product development. In the past, the companies, especially the semiconductor companies, are very averse to risk-taking and product development. They cite the lack of human resources, the lack of market studies, the lack of mentors. But now you have that. You have mentors inside the university. You have mentors in the industry. And there's a lot of you right now. And it requires a certain community to do product development. You need to share ideas. You need to bounce off each other's ideas. And you have to find solutions for your problems. And the only way to do that is to interact with other developers. You now have that. You have that community, I guess. That IC design company we talked to, that was a good success story. I think that was just like our experience. They were forced into a startup because they got laid off. They pulled together some money to start their services. And then the quality of the graduates, I think, are much better because you have the infrastructure here, you have good laboratories, you have good experience, you have a more well-developed curriculum that expose all these students to all the different fields. While previously, we had nothing like we had no labs, we had no laboratories at all. If I were you, I'd join 2 labs. And join 2 projects, even if you don't get credits for them. Yes, because that the skill and knowledge you will get from those 2 labs, you will surely be using later on. You will be able to use them later on. My only regret was not being able to join the different labs at that time because we had none. So, in terms of funding, I think the OST is very generous always. And through PICARI, through the scholarships, through the projects that they are funding. There's one thing I found out in ASTIC before, and it was before, so I think it's more true. It's truer today than before. But before I saw a lot of money in government that if properly mobilized and properly used, could make a lot of difference. I'm pretty sure they have a lot more right now.
Can you comment on, let's say, the job opportunities now and before, specifically in terms of, let's say, RF circuits and so on? So how much has the opportunities changed? You mentioned before that before it was just only ASTI, but now are there more choices?
There's not so much a quantitative difference, but qualitative, I guess. At that time it was just ASTI working on microwaves and Sir Hilary's company back then. I was doing contract research with ASTI for some wireless applications. Now, with Remek gone, actually, when Remek was there, it was a huge opportunity. Remember I said we were able to absorb 20 engineers at the time. and we were able to set up an R&D group with Dr. Jay Sabido heading it, with a lot of UP engineers in there. I don't know if one guy actually took his master's, si Toti, is he still here?
It's finishing tomorrow.
Oh, alright. So, but and that's just one company. If you imagine if you have several companies like that, how much more can they absorb? How much, how many more engineers can they absorb? Right now it's Surtec. Surtec is into the same space, radio manufacturing, and right before I left, I mentioned we started the product development activities, and they're still doing it. So there's an opportunity there. One project was I think you started one year with Joel, the rural base station, and I think there's a future there in that product. And Surtec is, before I left, seriously considering setting up a group for that and manufacture eventually something similar for global smartphone. Aside from that, I cannot think of any company, any other company. Yeah, Asti, I think. There was a company in BGC before that was doing RFIC sampling, wireless application for IC design. Yeah, so they were, that's Wiki. Bit micro. But again, that disappeared. But I don't think it will be a problem if the wireless comm graduates go out of the country to find a job and to pull themselves up. And then come back, because that's what the founders of Pacific Microwave did. Went to the US, worked in Silicon Valley, gained experience, gained some money there, came back here to set up a company.
Actually, kind of hoping there'll be questions more from the students, and I don't have to take this the microphone. But anyway, allow me to use this opportunity again, because there are 3 people here in the audience who are very instrumental, in my view, in setting up what we have upstairs is the Wireless Communications Engineering Laboratory. And so this is a time to give a shout out to them. Of course, our guest, si Jojo Ochave, was working then in ASTI. ASTI, Advanced Science Technology Institute, was at the 4th floor of NEC building when the EEE department was at the 3rd floor of NEC department. So we used to go upstairs, downstairs, any time of the day, because then we didn't have a wireless lab, an RF lab, then they had the RF lab. And every time we go there, we were salivating, you know. We were using HP, ESOF, we were using Sun Spark stations, the first time we ever saw those kinds of machines. That's the first time we encountered Unix, etc., those things. And the first time we ever saw vector network analyzer and a spectrum analyzer. So Jojo Ochave was kind of a mentor. There's isa siyang engineer no apprentice, si Raja Castillo, who was 1 year ahead of me, and he was my teacher in one of the subjects. So I guess that was really responsible for setting up the RF track, wireless track. If it were not for that, wala tayong RF and wireless here in UP. And I can tell you, nobody, it's kind of unfortunate then that no other university teaches RF and wireless in the same way that we do, because precisely the equipment is very expensive. Network analyzers, spectrum analyzers, signal sources going up to 6 gigahertz, 10 gigahertz, it's very hard to find. Okay, and the second person I wish to acknowledge, si Prof. Romy Solis. Are you still here, si Prof. Romy? I don't know if he's still here, but he was the head of ASTI then, the director of ASTI then. And he encouraged that kind of interaction. Nung lumipat ang ASTI dun sa kabila sa CP Garcia, that CP Garcia Road literally and figuratively drove a big chasm between UP and ASTI. So I'm there right now, precisely trying to bridge again this establish this connection again. So I'm taking this opportunity to do a shameless plug that hopefully some of you will consider working with us there. We've already recruited a couple of your senior batchmates to upperclassmen who have already graduated to work there. The third person I want to acknowledge, in line with this talk of Jojo, is Dr. Roel Ocampo, who is there seated quietly. He was the chairman of EE then department. And one of the challenges that he gave us when I was a first year faculty member is magtayo ng RF lab. I remember he came to me one day with dalawang signs. Communications Engineering Laboratory, nakaprint dun sa isa, Radio Frequency Laboratory. So sabi niya, ano ba, ang didikit natin dito sa kwartong to? Sabi ko, baka yung cell, kasi yung ASTI, Communications Engineering Division. I think Zojo was the head of that, CED. That was very famous then. So we established Communications Engineering Lab. And then we encouraged na mag-develop kami ng laboratory experiments in RF and wireless. And so the first thing that we bought, when we had some money through umuutang pa ang Philippine government noon in order to fund the laboratories through World Bank. The first thing we did was umakyat kami ng ASTI, nagtuturo kami doon. Ito, tinuro, para kami nag-shopping. No? Network analyzer, we wish we could have it all, but the budget had a limit. So we were only able to get one vector network analyzer, one spectrum analyzer, and some accessories. And that was enough to jumpstart the radio frequency microwave curriculum dito sa UP. That was 1995, 1994, around that period. So I really don't have any question for Jojo, just to say that do not let where you are right now, don't gloss over the fact that ang haba ng pinanggalingan yan in terms of how things came about, right? And I guess the idea is to inspire you guys to start something. Start something wherever you may go. You start something new, and you always have these people who are willing to mentor you and support you and give you that back. So just like our guests here today. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, so our next speaker is one of our distinguished alumni. Okay, so he received his BSEE back in 71, as well as MSEE back in 1973, both of them from UP Diliman. Okay, so he was a former lecturer here in EEEI back in the 70s, early 70s, but now he's the current president of Micrologic Systems Incorporated, chairman of the board of Beta Micrologic JV Corporation, as well as a board member and treasurer of Technologica Pilipinas Incorporated. So I'm sure mahabang kwento natin, 30 years of his experience. So our next speaker is none other than Sir Hilary de Leon.
Good afternoon to everyone. So my talk today will be covering a relatively long period. So I had to present some slides, so we can go through them within the limited time. As mentioned by Franz, I used to teach here. My first job was teaching, really. I was an instructor in EE. At that time, we were only 6 or 7 faculty members. And the whole EE department was just one room in Pelzor Hall. That's why when I see all these facilities here, the building, the many students, I'm amazed. But it doesn't mean that at that time EE was easier. In fact, typically the graduation time of EE students then was 6 to 7 years. That was the average. And since I taught right away after graduation, I even had a student who was already in UP college when I was still a freshman in high school. Yeah. That's how long he stayed in UP at that time. Okay. However, I only taught for 3 years because I wanted to pursue I think it's more useful, I don't know the term, no? But a more meaningful career, which is designing products, because that's what we engineers are supposed to do. No? We are supposed to create new technologies, design products which are useful to society. And so after working for an electronics manufacturing company, at that time there were no microcomputers yet. There were audio products, most of the electronics products manufactured locally were audio, stereo, radios, and things like that. So after going through that, I decided to pursue something more interesting and establish a company called Industrial Microprocessor Controls. Just to give you a flavor of what kind of technology was available at that time, some of the first microprocessors which came out came from Motorola and Intel. But Motorola was more available, so this is a development kit which we programmed to control a glass batching plant. And this is not a small company, it was Republic Glass. Very ambitious. It's an 8-bit MPU, 1K ROM. The RAM is so tiny, and we had to program in hex, not even in assembly language. There was no assemblers yet, so we had to enter machine codes. So you can imagine how hard it is to edit. If there is a bug, if there is a problem, you have to manually re-enter. Let's say you have already 1K long program, and then somewhere in the middle, you have to insert a code. Then you have to push down all the remaining instructions to do that. But it was very interesting. It was very new at that time, so we went through it, and we were sequencing a particular process. I don't remember what it was, but that's when we realized how fragile, how difficult it is to make fragile electronic equipment, because these are digital circuits running at so many megahertz in a very harsh environment. It is a factory, very dirty. The electrical and electromagnetic noise was tremendous. So it took us a long time to really make it work, but at least it did work. Now, one of the first microcomputers which came out is the Apple II. This again is an 8-bit microprocessor, and it has a very large memory of 16K. Floppy disk, mass storage of 144K. I think that's only. Now it's very hard to imagine how we were able to do these things. No? So for this particular project, we controlled the switching of a studio, because there are many. This is for a broadcasting network. This station still exists. DCFE, 98.7 megahertz, classical. They play classical. They had so many studios and so many transmitters, but it's like a matrix. No? Sometimes one studio connects to transmitter one and so on. So we had to automate that, and we use the Apple II for that. We developed a card. We plug the card inside the Apple II to control the switches. It's like a parallel I/O card. And then we had relays. We programmed this in BASIC, which is an interpretive language. I don't know if you've heard of BASIC. But the BASIC interpreter allowed you to access the memory. They had commands, so you can access the memory, you can read and write, and the I/O ports also. So in a way, it was a high-level language with low-level capabilities. Now, incidentally, specs like that now, you can find that in a $1 microcontroller. Okay, at that time there was no internet, no modem. The way to communicate between countries especially in long distances, is through telex machine. Now, telex machine, you send current pulses. Now, instead of it's a series of bits representing a character, like the ASCII code, but they call it Bodo code. So, but this is very clunky, it's so primitive and it's so difficult to operate. So, a carrier and a bank asked us if we can make an electronic version of this particular machine. So we did that. We used the Z80 microprocessor, which was one of the most powerful at that time. And of course, you still have the limited RAM and EEPROM, which is already enough for us. And then we interface it to an Apple II. And I think at that time, the PC was already available, the IBM PC. So the IBM PC served as the keyboard and that paper thing there. So the screen and the keyboard was replaced, and then you just have a box, and then you are able to receive and transmit telex messages already. That's an example. Now, again, something to do with telex. That was the big thing then. We were asked to develop an emulator in the switch. This is in the central office already. Central office of Philcom. Philcom was a major telecom carrier at that time. So we were asked to make an electronic version of their switch, which was mechanical in a way. So this particular board that I used was a 68,000 development board. So it is already one generation higher than the first one, which was 6800. Now this is 16-bit. 16-bit. But it had many channels. Look at all those ICs. You can see all those ICs over there. And then you have the EEPROM. So it was able to interface to multiple lines. Now the reason why I'm showing this is because we developed, most of it was my work, I developed a multitasking kernel. Multitasking kernel in assembly language. Because you have to support 16 lines simultaneously. So they're running, all the 16 lines, and different stages of communication. In effect, you have only one application. But this single application will have to run on 16 I/O ports at the same time. So, I developed a task switch where you save the registers. You have a timer which generates interrupts, and then every time you have an interrupt, you save all the registers of the microprocessor. And then you change the program counter. So you switch to the next line, okay? And so on and so forth. So I think it was one of the, it's like a multitasking OS in effect. Because at that time we didn't use operating systems, everything ourselves. We had to program in very low level, the I/O, everything, the prioritization, the timer, etc. You have to do it in your own application. So I was amazed that it worked. Oh, this is another interesting project. IBM System 3 mini computers. They were very popular at that time. Many big companies use IBM mainframe and mini computers. Now these mini computers, they have a micro instruction. In other words, every machine instruction has a corresponding set of micro instructions. So when you execute a machine instruction, it in effect calls a series of lower level instructions. Let's say you just want to transfer register to memory, something like that. Okay? Then you have a set of micro instructions to do that. But this is stored in volatile memory. So every time you boot or start the mini computer, that micro instruction has to be loaded into the machine. And that is usually an 8-inch floppy disk. 8-inch. with storage capacity of 128K. So we were able to duplicate the disk. So cut the story short. Using a Z80 based microcomputer. So what we did is we read the diskette, the disk track by track, byte by byte. And after doing that, we wrote it back to a blank disk. And it worked. Imagine, the reason why there was a need for this was because IBM was making it very difficult for their clients. If something went wrong with your boot disk, then you have to request, it took so long, it cost so much. And I was working for a computer engineering corporation at that time who was maintaining IBM mainframes at that time. They were the biggest maintenance company for IBM after IBM Philippines. Of course, they came all from IBM. I was involved in 1986. I don't know if you have an idea of what happened then, but there were election fraud, no? When there was during the Marcos versus Aquino election, and somebody approached me to develop a voting device. Okay, so this particular device we did develop, and it works by pressing buttons on the box. So in effect, the candidates were here on the keyboard, and then the voter ID is entered here. So the voter ID is validated first, and then the voter will enter the votes on the main keyboard. And then I don't remember how I designed it so the data can be retrieved. I think it's connected to a PC, or there must be some memory card then, because at that time there were no standards yet. There was the PCMCIA card, I can remember that. But no USB or micro SD cards yet at that time. So this was presented to the authorities, but unfortunately they were afraid that, just like with the PICOS, they're afraid that the data will be tampered. So it remained just a prototype. Okay, then I established a company called Mytech Corporation under IMI. IMI, as you're aware, is part of the Ayala Group. So this particular company wanted to design products instead of just manufacturing for other people. Because if you have a product, then opportunities are unlimited. So one of the products that we started was a time recording system. I don't have a picture here how it looks like. But it's basically a Bundy clock using magnetic cards. The data was saved in the floppy disk. So we used the Z80 microprocessor, and we had to support the DOS file allocation table. You remember that? Using by programming the Z80. This was relatively successful at that time, and we had around more than 100 customers. Another product was the car park system. As you can see now, most car park in malls, most of the car parks have machines where you get the card and then you surrender it. We started that a long time ago. We were one of the first. Then we also developed a handheld computer when I was still with Mytech. This is basically a handheld computer with a UHF radio. And it was used to monitor the containers in North Harbor. Yes, we also developed an IC, must be one of the first commercial IC designed in the Philippines. This particular IC was designed to monitor sensors in a building, monitor and control devices in a building. But this is just one IC, and with 3 wires, just interconnect all the 3 wires, you'll be able to monitor and control equipment in a building. One product we developed for a US company, because there was a time we accepted the contract development work, is a callback device, which will allow you to, this device is designed to save on telephone bills when you're calling the US. Because at that time there was no Skype or Viber, or things like those. So what you do is you call a number in the US, and after so many rings, like 6 rings, it will detect that there are 6 rings already. It will call you back. And when it calls you back, you can already avail of the low telephone rates of the number that you are calling. So, instead of paying for the usual overseas telephone calls, the PLDT charges, you pay the much lower rates that the US carrier charges. So this, I think this is still being sold. I saw their website, but we developed this a long time ago. I don't know what the demand for this is. Another interesting project we did for a US company is a portable image scanner. Yeah, there was at this particular product, you know, these scanners, handheld scanners, is interfaced to a portable unit. So the output of the scanner is saved in a floppy disk, which is inside the unit. So it's all portable, battery operated. This particular project, we had to implement JPEG compression in C, based on the description alone, based on the specs of JPEG. we had to do it ourselves in C, because there were no commercial tools yet or libraries at that time. Okay. Now, after MyTech, I established Micrologic Systems. And our first few projects were in China. Our project was basically toll collection systems, the one you see in the expressways. But at that time, it was still very primitive. And this particular device that we developed is an integrated unit. You'll notice it has a keyboard, LCD, mag stripe, reader, floppy disk drive, printer, and this is the toll fare indicator. So it's all in one integrated. A version of this we exported to China, and that was in the year 90s. So imagine a Filipino company exporting electronic products to China at that time. And these are designed here in the Philippines. They're not just manufactured for China. So that is unthinkable nowadays. Well, because of that, precisely because of that reason, the market did not last long for us. Because when the Chinese realized, oh, there is some opportunities in this field, then they came up with their own. And that was the end of our Chinese market. But this one, this particular machine, we installed this in NLEX, in SLEX, for around 10 years in NLEX before the foreign proponents took over. Before that, they were using Omron POS, and they did not last very long. So this one was designed to address vandalism issues. Like this particular keyboard, because the toll teller has a tendency to sabotage the machine. So they pour soft drinks. Yeah. So in our case, we designed an internal drainage system. So when pour liquid into the machine, the liquid will go out and be drained. That's why it lasted for 10 years. So those are some of the realities in developing products for the Philippine market that you will have to face when you decide to be an entrepreneur and pursue this kind of business. Now, a more modern toll collection system has these components. So, this is a picture of NAIA Toll Plaza in South Luzon Expressway, Skyway. Most of the equipment you see here are either manufactured or integrated by my company. Like this lane controller, which automatically classifies the vehicle. When the vehicle passes, there is a sensor that counts the number of axles and a height detector that determines the height. Based on that, you will know how much it should pay, how much to charge the vehicle. So class 1, class 2, class 3, like that. So we manufacture that part, and also the toll fare indicator, which is basically an LED matrix display. And then smart card reader, we also manufacture that. And some of the sensors here we integrate. And the others, we just import because these are standard products, off-the-shelf products, and things like traffic lights are imported. So my company, Micrologic, has been installing and supplying toll collection systems for around 25 years already. So we have a long list of clients. Most of the expressways in the Philippines have been our clients, like Manila, Cavite Toll Expressway, or then the Star Expressway in Batangas. We also did the project in Indonesia. So besides exporting to China, we were able to also export to Indonesia. And then this is the NAIA Toll Plaza I mentioned earlier. One of our newer projects is the new expressway in the north, T-Plex. This will go all the way to Rosario. Now it has reached only Binalonan. So there are 2 more toll plazas before it reaches Rosario. That's the foot of the Cannon Road. You will notice that there are dispensers. There is a card dispenser here. So that's one of the things that make our system a little different. There are card dispensers today. So the entry lane is unmanned. One of our newer projects was the new toll plaza in Star Expressway, Batangas. Well, let's digress a bit from electronics. Well, not necessarily, but one of my older interests before I decided to take up EE was aeronautical engineering. So when I had the time and the money, I decided to study flying, and I saw some opportunities. So one of them is a flight data recorder for light aircraft. If you'll notice, when a large airline crashes, they have this black box. They retrieve that, and then they try to find out what really happened. So I developed a version of that for small planes. And this particular device is almost standalone. It does not have to interface to any of the instruments of the airplane. And it uses a GPS receiver. When I developed these GPS receivers were still complicated and expensive. But now it's very common. No? So it records the location, the altitude. I also use accelerometers. And this was more than 10 years ago. Accelerometers now are found in your smartphones. You know? But for this particular application, I use it for determining the altitude of the airplane. Since the Philippine market is too small for this, I had to look for a partner in the US, and we had to file for a US patent, and it was granted. This was awarded a patent in the US, but it was very difficult to market. Also related to aviation, since 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 my interest was airplanes, I decided to build an airplane. And this was built totally from scratch. It's a four-seater, all aluminum. It's not an ultralight where you have fabric skin. No? This is a real plane. So, since that was my interest, I decided to build one. And just to show you some pictures of how I did it. So I started from plain aluminum sheet, and then cut them, and then bent them so they become angles, which are stronger. So the frame that you see there, the yellow one, they're actually, but these are all aircraft grade aluminum which I had to import from the US. And then, yeah, including the wings and the instrument panel and so on. I'm showing this because if you are really determined, if you have an interest in something, even if the technology is different from what you're familiar with, but because of your training in UP, for your ability to learn new things on your own, because to make this, I had to teach myself so many things. I had to study aeronautical engineering, aircraft structures, and so on and so forth. But it's possible. It's possible when you are really determined and decided. It was an expensive hobby. But I was hoping that I can start a local aircraft industry, but I think that was too ambitious. Not that simple. Now the other product that we pursued in micrologic systems is automatic fare collection. One of the products we developed is a cellular phone-based automatic fare collection system. In other words, we installed this in MRT, even before the beep. The beep card? Even before that, we installed this system in MRT on the existing turnstile gates. In the beep, they had to change the turnstile gates. In our case, we had to reverse engineer the existing turnstile gates because the manufacturer did not allow us to interface. So we had to reverse engineer, study how it works before we were able to interface the system. Anyway, the idea here was the reloading you can do using by cell phone. And at that time, I think we used Globe GCash to load the card and the chips. And we were granted again a US and Philippine patent for this particular design. Because you will be able to, let's say you're holding your cell phone, you load it using the GCash instructions, text instructions. And then when you reach the gate, your card is already loaded. You don't have to go to any retail store or POS, etc. And because of that, we were given US and Philippine patents. Actually, if you have a US patent, it's so easy to get a Philippine patent. Because the IPO, they don't really understand how to assess your invention. So they will just say, especially high-tech inventions, they don't understand. So if they already see that your product is patented in the US, they will grant it to you. And at least in the US, they have there's a limited number of years to process a patent application. It does not take forever. So that's the nice thing about having it patented there. Okay, I already described this. Well, the other fare collection system we developed was for passenger ferry. We provided everything for this particular project: the gates, the servers, etc. And interestingly, the back-end software of this was developed by a UP professor. What your faculty say? I just don't know if it was official, so I will not mention the name. In one of the OST's road train, one of the OST's projects, the road train, so we also installed a turnstile gate. Now this time it's on-board collection. No? It's not, the gates are not in the station. It's in the bus or road train itself. So when you ride the bus, you have to tap it on the turnstile, and then when you exit, the fare is computed automatically because the bus has a GPS, so it knows how much to charge you, but how much fare to charge you. We also were into telemetry and SCADA. That's one of our products in our logic system. So we did some work for an RTU, remote terminal unit. This monitors, that box there, it monitors the water flow, water level, voltage, current, etc. And then transmits it by text message. But this was a customized product at that time. And the other project we had in the 90s also was the wireless telemetry and SCADA for the Metro Cebu Water District. That was the second biggest water district in the Philippines. Of course, you cannot be bigger than Metro Manila. But this was quite a significant project. It required, I think, around 20 to 30 locations. We were monitoring pump houses. We were monitoring, controlling pump houses. And we used UHF radio for this particular. There was no cellular telephone yet at that time. One of my more recent projects, products which are related to the SCADA is a power line monitoring and control through SMS text. So this is particular, this model, it can monitor the voltage, current, power, energy of three-phase loads. So you can see there, that's a screen, sample text, the data that you can get, and it can also automatically alert you if there is a, let's say there is a brownout or there's single phasing, it's three-phase, and then you have single phasing condition, it will automatically text you. At the same time, you can also turn on or off the pump by text. So even if you are abroad in the US, you can monitor what is going on in your installation here in the Philippines. So this is a new one, and we have already a few units installed in a condominium and a subdivision. The other new product we have is a wireless solar powered tank level sensor. One of the more, these water tanks are very high, they're very difficult to access. And if you use ordinary level sensors, you have to wire them. So what we did is we made it solar powered, we made it text-based, and the sample text is there. So if the water level is going very low, it will send an alert immediately. If it's getting too high or full, it will also send an alert. So these things hopefully can stimulate you in thinking of products, even now, even if you're just students. But there are problems. There are many challenges. It's not that simple, really. For one thing, there are so many products from China and Taiwan, and we cannot compete with in price. So it's very difficult to pursue products which are high volume, like computers, laptops, smartphones, and things like that. You have to look for later on. And then the other, as Jojo mentioned, it's a high-risk business, very high risk. There is no certainty that you will make money. But my point here is that if you create the product yourself, you have more control of the business. The electronics industry in the Philippines has been so dependent on contract manufacturing. They make for other people. They have to listen to what the customer says. If the customer becomes bankrupt, you also become bankrupt. Okay? So you're so dependent. And what are you contributing? You're just contributing cheap labor, in effect. And that's not engineering. The engineering part, they will give to you. Okay? So the cyclic dilemma is not as applicable as when you have your own product, when you have your own ideas, you have your own way of marketing, you have your own way of, at any time you can improve and you can adapt to the trends. So if the trend is like this, since you're the designer, then you can easily adapt. Okay? So it's easier to survive, actually, I think. And then, of course, there is always the resistance to locally developed products. That is very tough. So the colonial mentality of Filipinos is still there, especially if you are selling a high-tech product that will be used in very critical applications like involving money, involving safety, and so on. No? We are not known. The Philippines is not known for this kind of equipment. So there is that resistance. And then we have the manpower problem. To tackle that, we just have to train fresh graduates because we cannot compete with the salaries that multinationals are giving. And sometimes the nationalistic approach, which Prof. Sol is used on, doesn't always work. Yeah. Because there are so many opportunities out there. When you join the government bidding, they will ask, how many have you installed? Okay? Now you're a local company, you just developed this product, you installed it in 1 or 2 small clients. But they will tell you, you should have installed in 20 different big clients, and you should have 100,000 users, something like that. So how can you compete? No more. You cannot bid because you will be disqualified right away. Okay. And then when you want to export, you have to get FCC approval, you have to get UL, CSA, etc., etc. And all of that costs money. But recently we have this EPDC under Dr. Marciano, which hopefully will be able to address that problem. Now the VCs here in the Philippines, based on my observations, are still very conservative. They still want to be sure that they will be able to get back their money. So it's hard to get funding for the kind of business that I went into. Well, I already mentioned some of this earlier. One thing that as engineers that I'd like to emphasize is testing products thoroughly, especially under actual conditions. You have undertook, most of you, thesis projects, right? Right. And you already experienced the pressure, having to finish it on time, etc. Then looking for the brightest among you to do most of the work. Isn't it? So, in the real world, when your product or your project works, that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. In your case, since you're still students, that's the end already. But in the real world, you have to put it in the field. If it's designed to work in a factory, it's designed to work in the roads, in a car, etc. Because what will happen is the client will this colonial mentality problem will worsen. Because if, let's say, your product fails, they will say it's local. That's why it fails. It's local. So when will this colonial mentality problem disappear? Okay? So it's very important that you test it. And then you can focus on your strengths. Don't do everything yourself. Like in my case, I had small portions of my projects before done by UP EEEI when it was still Joel. Joel's time, and even during Geb's time,
Yeah.
I asked them to do some work for us. So it's a portion of the project, especially because you cannot have all the engineers who will be experts in all these different fields. And then even if you have them, there will be instances when you don't have work, when you don't have projects. So you'll be paying the salary of these engineers and they're not doing anything. So, and then ASTI, I also had ASTI do some work before, as Jojo mentioned. And, okay, we already have an industry association, IAPI. Very recently, the OST has been very supportive of IAPI. And they have been funding some R&D projects already. So if you are a member of this association, you can avail of this funding. Funding is very important in this business. And then you can also have a say in government policies. For instance, the government procures so many electronic equipment in their budget. It's in the billions. Imagine if they just localize 1% of that, 2% of that. It's already substantial. It's enough to start a new industry. For instance, how much UPS does the government buy? We have already several companies in IAPI who are manufacturing UPS, but they cannot compete with the very low cost from China. And the more sophisticated, the big UPS units, like in the order of 20 kVA, they still don't have the capability for that. But if the government will slowly say, okay, if there is a locally available electronic product, and the specs are the same, then we give you priority. So that company will now grow slowly, because in a way they have a captive market. And then once a certain scale or level is attained, then they have the economies of scale already to compete internationally or with the other imported product. So that is one of the reasons why it is important to be active also in an industry association. And of course, you have to be flexible because the trend, the technology business is very fast-paced. Okay? If you're too slow in developing your prototype, by the time you finish it, maybe it's already obsolete. That is the real world market. You have to be very fast. In fact, along the way, you may have to make changes also in your design based on the market trends. So that is, you don't insist on what you think is right or wrong. You have to look at the market. So, otherwise, your product will just be a laboratory curiosity. Oh, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sir Hilary. So, nakita niyo na, no? Ako nakaka-relate ako dun sa mga iba't ibang microprocessors na ginamit. Kasi iba doon nabutan ko pa eh. Now that we have this opportunity, anyone in the group you'd like to ask? Kunyari, nag-experience ni Sir Hilary, developing products year in and year out over the 3 decades that he's been, very active in the industry. What? Don't be shy, come on. Ask me.
Habang nag-iisip pa sila, saka ako muna. Kasi may ano plano mo siya? Buhay pa ba siya?
The story of the plane. When it was completed, when I was building it, it took me 8 years, I think, to build it. When I was building it, I already contracted a professional pilot to be the test pilot. Because understandably, it is very hard to convince a person to test fly this kind of, it's a home-built airplane. Okay? So he agreed. So I was happy. And then, however, by the time I finished it, he was already married. And he had one kid. And he was gainfully employed in a major airline. So it will be inhuman for me to still force him to be a test pilot. So my only choice is for me to be the test pilot. So I did some taxi tests on the runway. And when I was ready to fly it, my wife said, I think this is the end of your of this. So that was the end. I sold the plane to a school that's teaching aircraft maintenance. That's where it is now. It's somewhere in Pampanga.
Did it ever get certification?
It is not that simple to get certification. And usually it's an experimental aircraft. So you don't need, I was able to register it with ATO. It had a call sign number.
Going back to my second question. May nakwento kayo kanina, sir, di ba, it's a fair collection system. You have to improve the keypad such that mga nagbabandal, di ba, parang resistant siya doon. Ano ba iba, sir, natutunan ninyo along the way na kinonsider ninyo eventually in your product development, specifically for the Philippine market? Similar instances.
Well, I think one of the important considerations is the maintainability. Because if your equipment fails and it's very hard to repair, then the tendency of customers is to just neglect it. Now, if they're using an imported product and there is no local representative and it breaks down, then they will have to depend on foreign engineers. So there is the advantage of being a local company. Because it's not only service engineers who will fix it, but the designers themselves who are in a better position to repair a piece of equipment than the designer. But again, this is local. There is always this negative mentality. Local yan, sirain yan, ganyan. So when it breaks down, they always think, because it's local. So it has to be easily maintainable. And either by your own staff, but that cannot be forever because the warranty is only 1 year usually. After the warranty, it has to be maintained by the client. So the client should be equipped. And in fact, you should not use too many specialized components. So when the client decides to purchase the spare parts themselves, they can do it. That is why in NLEX, North Luzon Expressway, our machine lasted for 10 years. And if the foreign group did not take over, it might still be there. And they were the ones already maintaining it. So that is one of the things that I'd like to do.
From the students? Thank you.
Sir, what's your take on planned obsolescence, wherein designers design their products to specifically expire by a certain point in time? Ano po ba yun? Is it good for the industry or bad po?
You know, I think this idea, planned obsolescence, I think this is applicable to consumer products, mainstream products, and things like that when they're really trying to force the customer to change to a new model so that they will survive. So I think that's a practice. It cannot be avoided. That is why the R&D budget of these companies are so huge. They keep on developing continuously because even if by itself it will not become obsolete, they may have intentions of coming up with a new one to replace the old one. So it's a question of sustainability. For instance, sustaining the business and the growth. people, you have, our smartphones now are very powerful, but it's in spite of that, still continuously new models come out, and people still buy. You have applications which before can be done with a 1 megabyte memory, but because of the demand of this particular application, the memory has to be increased, and so on and so forth. Subconsciously, this is actually being driven by the suppliers, and the consumers are riding on this. In industrial products, that is not very applicable. We have, if the equipment, it's the other way around, if the equipment has a useful life of 10 years, they will use it for 10 years. If it's 15 years, they will use it for 15 years. Because the demands of the application are not as great as in consumer or IT products.
Other questions?
Hey sir, how hard is it to build a startup company? And how did you learn all about of engineering like marketing and funding, since such business courses is not available on our curriculum?
Well, I guess it's hard to be an entrepreneur right away, fresh from school. You have to work somewhere else first and try to gather some experience and some learn the ropes and network. Because when you start a business, you may have a great idea, but if you don't have the way to market it, it's useless. It's very difficult. So when you work in after graduation, you work in a company, and you have plans of being an entrepreneur, you have to be very conscious of the business side, not only the engineering aspect of it. But there are courses that you can take. I think there are short courses in business management, and there is technology management center. Yeah. So you can avail of some formal training. In my case, it was more on by advocacy for locally developed products. But I had to look for, along the way, what happens is you have an idea and you try to market that. Along the way, you talk to clients, customers, and then they say, oh, we have this demand, we have this requirement, can you do this? Okay, I'll do that. Okay. And that can be the start of a bigger opportunity. It may be different from your original idea, right? Even Dado Banatao had this when he started S3, he was into parallel processors. I think it just so happens that demand at that time was into graphics, but the technology of parallel processors can be used in graphics. So he went into graphics and established S3. That was one of the first graphics engine companies. So if you just sit down and then imagine and then try to just decide on yourself, you have to act. You have to act. If let's say you have an idea, okay, let me pursue this. You pursue it, okay. And then you, along the way, there will be other opportunities. If the opportunity that came out is exactly the same as what you have in mind, then that is great. But honestly speaking, it is very rare. Usually there are other things that you have to consider before finalizing on what kind of product you want to develop. Now, let me add something here. During our time, it was more difficult to develop products because, in fact, we had to develop our own tools for development. There was a time I had to write an assembler for 6502 microprocessor using Turbo Pascal because there was no assembler for that particular microprocessor. Imagine that. Now, who programs in assembler? Here. Nobody. The low-level language that you use is C, C++. There's so very... and then there's so many tools in the market, development kits. All the different ways for you to evaluate a new product and come up with a useful design are already there. And then the cost. You don't need a lot of funding to come up. You have a great idea. You use Arduino. You use all these different types of ways to come up with a prototype. And then when you have a prototype and it's working, it's easier to convince investors. And then when you have convinced an investor, then you switch to a more appropriate technology. But you can use a faster method now of coming up with prototypes, unlike many years ago.
Additional questions from our group? So, talking about yung local companies, the API really have a hard time getting talent from UP to be part of the innovation of local industries.
When I was at MyTech, since it was an Ayala group, it's a part of the Ayala group, I was able to recruit talents from UP, some oral graduates and so on. But I have difficulty. Personally, I have difficulty managing UP graduates. Yeah, I find it easier to manage graduates from LaSalle, Ateneo, USD. But there was a time I stopped hiring UP graduates because they're not very cooperative. They have so many ideas. You already tell them how to do it. You do it this way because we have a timetable. It is proven. It has been done before by a senior engineer, but who happens to be a graduate of some other school. Yeah. Maybe because of that, they insist on their own. But we cannot afford to spend so much time and energy trying to convince him, oh, you should do this, because this is a business. It's not an academic environment where the intellect is more important than the business. Yeah. So, I don't know. I don't know about the more recent graduates because I have not much experience with them. But my experience with the AAP project of grid tied inverters is okay, and they were mostly UP graduates who undertook the project.
This afternoon has been very encouraging in terms of, our alumni and showing the skills that they have. So we have two different stories. Okay, Sir Jojo having to learn different things in school, boring at first, pero in the end, after seeing the actual project that needs to be developed, bigla niya na-apply yung mga natutunan niya just to be able to prove that this is something that can be done. Si Sir Hilary naman, as he said, when he started developing all those products, wala pa masyadong development tools available. And he had that skill as well. He had to do it. They did everything from scratch. And siguro one thing that is true is that because of their training in UP, that skill level was there. And it allowed them to, to be where they are right now. Apart from the skills, I guess, meaning. I hope hindi nyo makakalimutan yung meaning na yun. Okay, Sir Jojo, he has been a champion para doon sa RF. So, recalling yung isang kwentuhan namin ni Prof. Solis, one of the first founders for us, sila yung unang nag-decide na parang RF is about black magic. So it's either you get it or you don't. And yung simple theory lang ni Prof. Solis back then was that Filipinos are uniquely creative. And dahil yung black magic na yan is something na parang kayang-kaya ng I think what he said was, yung pagiging black magic ng RF is something that will appeal to Filipinos. And true enough. Actually, when ASTI started the RF group, we were even first than Singapore. actually Singapore came to the Philippines to study the model of ASTI when they set up the RF lab. Yun nga lang, mas maraming pera in Singapore. The year after, I think they bought at least 5 stations compared to 1 station that we had in the Philippines. Pero that shows you yung imagination back then na parang we can compete. And to this day, actually, hirap pa rin ng tao, ang mga companies to find RF talent. And I think the Philippines is still one of the top producers of RF. And I'm glad na magkakaroon nga ng microsat. And it's another area na pwede natin pakita yung creativity natin. And hopefully, by the year end, matatayo na yung our own anechoic chamber, our microsat facility here. And that will be the next parang development stage para sa RF capabilities ng Pilipinas. Pagdating naman sa IC design, nung nagsimula ako, just like you, several years back, isip namin, kailan mo magkakaroon ng IC ang Pilipinas? And now you know, even before that, meron nang gumawa. And that's Sir Hilary and his group. Actually, kinakwento ko ni Sir Hilary before, yung pag-apply ng US patent, he even had to learn that himself. Nobody taught him. Bumili lang siya ng libro. Hindi siya kumuha ng patent lawyer. But still, he managed to get the patent. So, yun lang. I guess, ngayon, narinig nyo naman yung nakwento ni Joel kanina, 20 years ago, walang-wala ang Tripoli in terms of facilities. Wala tayong lab. So we were really wanting back then. But now, things are very, very much different. Ang layo talaga ng narating ng institute. And I guess yun lang.